These videos were created for you to watch along. They'll teach you about client tracks so you know what's going on. So best of luck with all of your data. Now here's your HMIS system administrator.
Hello and welcome to the Georgia HMIS Path Training video. In this video, I'll be going over how to enroll a client into Path, how to record services and contacts, how to record referrals, and also how to exit a client. Besides this video, another great resource I highly recommend you getting a hold of is the HUD Path Manual. If you Google HUD Path Manual, this should be one of your first search results. This will take you to the HUD Exchange website. Here you can find the latest copy of the Path Program HMIS Manual. It's about a 30-page manual, and it really gets into the details of Path as it relates to HMIS. And it really gets into the details a lot more than we could ever really get to in a video, and that's why I recommend you getting a hold of this document and reading all the way through it. Another resource I recommend you getting is the HUD Data Dictionary, which you can Google. And this will take you to the HUD Exchange website as well, where you can get the latest and greatest version of the dictionary. This document applies to all of HMIS, not just Path. However, there is a Path-specific section, and we can see that here, where it gets into just Path HMIS fields. As far as the state of Georgia goes, you also have a state contact, and that is Jill Mays, and so I have her information listed here. If you ever have any policy type questions, she would be your go-to. However, always remember, if it's an issue within client track, you would just want to submit an issue ticket in that case. And before we get into really doing an intake on a client, there was one thing I wanted to just mention briefly, and that is that Path data collection is naturally challenging, and there's a few reasons why that's the case. One, if you consider just the physical location that you will be capturing this data. So for instance, you're probably not always going to be sitting at a desk in a well-lit office with the client sitting at a chair in front of you when you are capturing data, right? When it comes to Path, because it is a street outreach project, you are going to be out on the streets, you are going to be in different emergency shelters, perhaps, a lot of different areas that are not always ideal for data capture. Also, you are approaching clients versus clients approaching you. And so what that means is that sometimes when you encounter people, they're not going to be at a place where they're willing to just give you all of their information. If someone were to walk up to you on the street and want your social security number, you probably would not want to just hand that over. And so part of your job will be just building trust in the different interactions that you are having with the people you're coming in contact with. And also, it's important to remember that for the most part, a lot of the clients you're going to be working with do have SPMIs, and so you're going to be working with people that are medicated, people that should be medicated and are not. And because of all of these reasons, capturing the accurate data that is needed is sometimes going to be hard. And so I think it's just important that we are all aware of that before we kind of start this process of capturing data in a system like HMIS. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the client's workspace where we can start the intake process. So there's a few scenarios I want to go over in regards to doing an intake on a Path client. The first scenario, let's say we were able to get the client's demographic information. So we have their social security number, let's say we also have their birth date and their full name. Because this is a shared database, there's a chance that they already exist in the system, and instead of creating a brand new client record, we want to pull up that pre-existing one. To do that, we'll want to click on Find Client, and we'll start by looking at their social security number, searching for that. So I'm going to go ahead and type in their social security number and click search. It'll bring up anyone that matches that social, And then based on the birth date and name, we would be able to verify if this was the person we're trying to find. Let's say this is not the person we're trying to find because they have a different birth date. If that's the case, we would want to go ahead and clear out the social security number, and then we would want to just search by the client's birth date. If we don't see the record there, then finally we would want to search by their first and last name. And then, of course, based on social security number and birth date, we'd be able to verify if, in fact, this person exists in the system. Now, the reason we want to go through that process and searching for each of those individually is that while social security number in theory should pull up the client if they exist in the system, we know that sometimes data might be inputted incorrectly. Maybe the social security number was a digit off, maybe the birth date was a digit off, that kind of thing. And so we want to go through those steps in that order so that we are doing our best to try to locate this client if they exist in the system. And let's say we are able to confirm that this client right here is the client that we are wanting to work with. So I'll go ahead and click on them. I could click project intake, and I would use the option use the current client because we know this is the client that we've got pulled up now. And then it would go ahead and start that intake process. On the other hand, let's say in this scenario, we are doing an outreach and we come across a person. They have a green hat on. They are sleeping under the 10th Street Bridge. We're talking with them, but we're not able to get their demographic information. So with Path specifically, you want to go ahead and get an HMIS record and do an intake for client when you first start working with them. Even if you have not been able to do an actual assessment with them, you haven't been able to determine if they are Path eligible, the directions are you go ahead and get them into HMIS. And so that means that sometimes you might even have to use an alias. So I'm going to say that we want to go ahead and do an enrollment on this person. So I'm going to click on project intake. I'm going to say add a new client. And for this person, we are going to create an alias that we will hopefully be able to remember and then pull up later when we run across this person again. And so the idea here is that we would use a name that is something we would be able to remember, that would make sense, and that eventually, as we gather their actual demographic information, we would be updating this record at that point with their real name. So here, though, let's say we just want to call this person Green Hat as the first name, and then 10th Street Bridge as the last name, because that's really our best description of them so far, at least. So I'm going to go ahead and click Next, and because there's no one named Green Hat 10th Street Bridge, it's going to go ahead now and allow me to create this client record here. I do want to change this full name reported over to the partial street name or code name reported because, of course, that's not their real name. And then we're going to have a lot of data not collected. Now, normally we always advise you really watch out for using this option because this will show up on data quality reports. However, on Path, and this will make a little bit more sense a little bit later in the training, based on the stage we are at on collecting their data not collected is appropriate a lot of times for Path when you are first starting to work with a client. We do want to leave their relationship head of household to self because as far as we know, this person is just staying by themselves. We're on the family members page now, and we don't know of any family members that are staying with them, so we'll leave that alone. And then we'll get to our program enrollment screen. Now, for all Path providers, you should have a Path Street Outreach project and a Path Supportive Services project. And it's really important that you have both of those. If you don't see those when you go to enroll someone, you need to submit an issue ticket in the system so your COC admin can get those set up for you. Now, the way you determine which project you're going to enroll this client into is what is their living situation currently. If they are unsheltered, and that includes sleeping in a car, sleeping in a tent, sleeping in an abandoned building, anything like that, they would go under street outreach. If, however, they're homeless but they're not unsheltered, so let's say they're sleeping in an emergency shelter, you would use supportive services. Now, a few things to know about this is that whatever project you put them in to begin with, they are going to stay in that project. You're not going to put someone into street outreach because right now they're unsheltered, and then a week later you find out they're staying in an emergency shelter and then go switch them over to supportive services. They will stay in whatever initial project you enroll them in. Also, they would never be enrolled in two of these projects. So you're just going to enroll them into one or the other. And then finally, if you are not able to determine their living situation, so let's say this person that I run across under the bridge, I don't know they're actually sleeping there. I don't see a bag, a tent, or anything like that. Maybe they're sleeping in a shelter, but they're just hanging out here. Then supportive services is kind of the default catch-all. So if you're not able to determine where they're currently staying right now, you would just do supportive services and leave them in that. For this training, though, we're going to say we were able to determine that they are sleeping under the bridge. So I'm going to put them in street outreach because that is unsheltered. This will now give us a list of all the clients that we have in the family, as we saw previous on the family members page. So I'm going to go ahead and put a check mark by this client because this is one we're wanting to enroll. This is the one we're working with. And we've got several different fields here, and I'll go over each of these and what they represent. And the first one is the project start date. This represents just the first time you are keying this client into HMIS. And as a path project, you always want to go ahead and key in a client when you first start working with them, and not wait until you get assessments or you're able to determine that they're eligible for path. You want to go ahead and get them in the system. And so that's what this date represents now. So we're going to say today is the first time we are interacting with this client, and that is our project start date. Next, we have the case manager, which will just default to whatever user count is logged in, keying this in. If you needed to change this to a different user, you could use the magnifying glass to do that. And then this is the head of household, because we're saying this person is just by themselves. And then we get to the date of engagement. The date of engagement is the point at which an interactive client relationship results in a deliberate client assessment. So that means this date is when you've actually been able to sit down with the client and they have completed an assessment with you. This is also the date that data quality starts to matter for all the data that has been previously collected by you and all the data that will be collected for this enrollment going forward. So even though we just did a lot of don't knows and we used street name, if we had a date of engagement here, we would need to go back and fill that information in with what it actually is. And this is where you get into the different stages of path data collection. Next, we have the date path status determined. This is the date that you have been able to determine whether or not this client is eligible for path. And that's going to be that you've been able to determine they're homeless and they have an SPMI. You don't have to worry about if you determined if they were chronically homeless or anything like that. Again, we're just looking at, are they homeless and do they have an SPMI? Once you're able to determine that they're eligible for path or not eligible for path, you would put that date of determination here, and then you would go ahead and record either yes or no that they were enrolled in path. Now, these dates can be all the same. So if the first time you come across someone, you're able to go ahead and engage with them and get an assessment done and go ahead and determine if they're eligible for path, then all these dates could be the same. However, what happens a lot of times is it might just start with you having a project start date, and we haven't got to these steps yet with the client, and so we're going to leave these blanks. And in this scenario, that's what we're going to go with. So all we were able to do is kind of chat with the person initially here. So I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And even though we have said we haven't really done an assessment with this client yet, it still will walk you through the workflow. And so be prepared to continue through the workflow here. And what that means is we're just going to have a lot of data not collected on these fields. Now we do know, for instance, on this type of residence question that they are sleeping under a bridge, so that can give us the answer here. That would be a place not meant for habitation. We don't know how long they've been there, so we'll use data not collected. Approximate date homelessness started. This is a required field. And so if you're able to get this information from the client, you can key this in here. If not, you have to go with kind of your best guess or what you can say that you know. And all you would really be able to know is that this person is here now, so they slept here last night, but we don't know other than that. So it would be common to just choose the night before. And again, hopefully we would be able to update this information later when we get a full assessment from the client. So continuing on, there's just going to be a lot of data not collected. So I'll just continue on in this workflow, choosing these as the option. And of course, you've heard us say a million times, watch out, don't use data not collected because it'll show up on data quality reports. But because all we have is the project start date on this path enrollment, we don't have that date of engagement, none of this would show up on a HUD data quality report. Next, we get to the contact screen in the workflow. So a contact is any deliberate conversation, experience, anything you have with the client. So that could just be short conversation, that could be sitting down and doing an assessment with them, could be providing a service, anything like that is what's called a contact, and it is required that you record that in HMIS. So the first contact is going to be the first contact, the first time you meet with them, and that's going to be easy to record because it's automatically going to come up in the workflow here, and you're just going to want to choose the path contact. It'll always ask you, are they staying on streets, emergency shelter, or safe haven? So we are going to say yes because we know they are staying on the streets. This will automatically pull in some map GPS data, which is really beneficial if you're using a tablet or a laptop on site. Doesn't make as much sense when you're on desktop in office, but that's kind of the point of this field here. Then we have a comment box if there's anything helpful, a little note or something you can leave and here and refer to later, you can do that. And then we'll go ahead and click Save. And then this will get us to our Finish button, and we do want to always make sure, regardless of how much data we've been able to collect, to go all the way through the workflow. And this will take us back to the client's dashboard. And now we can see that there is a path street outreach listing listed here under enrollments, as well as the path contact service that we recorded as well. Something to think about though when it comes to path and enrollments is that even though there's a listing here, we know that this client is actually not enrolled in the path project itself because we don't have that date of determination when we've been able to determine that yet, and we don't have that question yes or no selected on that enrollment screen because again, all we've said so far is we were able to just contact that client. And so it can kind of be confusing though because we do see a path street outreach and enrollment right here, and if we were to go run a clients in program report, for instance, and then were to choose this project, it would show this client as enrolled. But again, because path has that second layer of are they actually enrolled in path, then when you go run the HUD data quality report or run your path report, you're going to get different numbers. And that's again because it's a two-stage process when it comes to enrollments. And so that's something that confuses a lot of end users. And so I just wanted to kind of go over that concept and make sure that is understood. So now for this training, let's say that it's another day and we have ran across this client again. We still have not been able to get them to sit down and do an assessment with us. But what's happened? We have had another contact with them. And like I mentioned previous, you need to always record a contact in the system anytime you have that with a client. So to do that, we'll go over to services, which we can just click on quick services here. We'll select our enrollment, select the grant, and then we'll go ahead and select path contact. And now it's the 16th, so we just want to make sure this is the date that we are recording this contact for. And then this question is required right here. This is the staying on streets, emergency shelter, or safe haven. So now on the 16th, where are they staying? Do we know they're still staying on the streets or emergency shelter? Or are they not staying there? Or are we unable to determine at this point? So we're going to say yes, this person is still sleeping under the bridge. And I'll go ahead and do save and close. And you would continue this route up until you get to the point where you're able to actually get that assessment. So once we get to a place where we have gone the next step and we've been able to sit down and assess them, then we need to go ahead and add our engagement date. And also, because once we add that engagement date, that's when data quality starts to matter. We need to also go in and correct all of the information that we put in, all of those data not collected. We want to fill those in. So let's go ahead and start that process. To do that, you want to use the Edit Enrollment Workflow option because it's going to walk us through the workflow all over again, allowing us to key in this new information that we have gotten on the client. So I'm going to go ahead and click Edit Enrollment Workflow. This first screen right here, we want to go ahead and update their name. So we're going to say that we have gathered their name at this point. We want to change this to full name reported. We want to go ahead and type in their social, type in their birth date, all of this information. And actually, because we had chosen data not collected for race, you'll want to actually go in and unselect that field right there, or you'll get this little message here that says invalid selections for race. So now we got that selected. We'll go ahead and click finish. All this information is still going to be the same. We still don't know of any other family member or any person that's staying with them. So here's where we would go ahead and set this date of engagement. And again, that's just confirming that we were able to actually do an assessment with them. And so we've got that. And this could go either way right here. We could have enough information where we were able to determine their past status, or maybe not. So for this training, let's say we still weren't able to determine their past status. We do have the date of engagement though. So again, data quality starts to matter now. We'll go ahead and click save here. And then this is going to bring up those initial assessments we did. So I've said that once we have that date of engagement, data quality starts to matter. And something important to realize about that is it starts to matter not only for new data we're collecting, but also for the pre-existing data. And so for instance, this assessment I did on 7/13, I need to go in and fill this in now, but I need to fill it in as it would be accurate for 7/13. So what that means is I'm actually asking the client, so hey, when I met you for the first time last week, I need to ask you some questions based on what your situation was then. So now hopefully we'd be able to go ahead and fill this information in here. Also, just for approximate date homelessness started, people get confused on this question sometimes, what it's trying to get at, but it's just talking about this episode of homelessness. So when did this episode of homelessness begin? Not when did you become homeless for the first time. So there's a big difference there. We want to make sure we're asking this question properly. A good follow-up question to this to kind of help you get a good answer for this is you could ask, well, when was the last time you were permanently housed? And when did you lose that housing? And then the date they lost that housing and became homeless, then that would be this date. That would be the date that they started becoming homeless for this time. So we'll go ahead and update this information. And then continue in the workflow. We've got our, do they have a connection with SOAR? Now I'll have to answer all the barrier questions. I just noticed here for disabling condition, we still have data not collected. That is found under universal data assessment. So we'd want to go back here, make sure we've answered that. So you do really want to be careful as you're going through here. Make sure you go in and get all this information updated. Yep, now that's showing up there. Now let's go ahead and answer these again, and we can continue on in the workflow. And again, we're asking this based on this date. So you would not go change this date to be today's date. You are keying in this information as it was accurate on this date. So we would have need to ask them on 7/13, what was your income? Did you have any income sources then? And here we'll go ahead and actually for this right here, this is the original contact service that we recorded. Here we would want to leave this alone because this would, if we went in and changed this date here, it would actually modify that original contact service that we had, and then it would not show that we had a contact on the 13th. So we'd actually want to leave that alone there and just go ahead and click save and click finish. And then what's the other thing we've got to do now? Now, because we have had this other contact where we've said, we have engaged with the client, we need to go ahead and record that as a contact as well. So we would do that, which actually I forget which date of engagement we used. So I'm just going to go partially through the workflow here. And the 17th. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of that workflow because I don't need to continue on in it. And then we'll go to quick services. And we're just having to set a future date for this since we're kind of making this data up. And then go ahead and do that other contact. And there we go. Now we've got that recorded. Because again, if we have that engagement date, that's going to be a date that there's a contact happening, and so we want to make sure that the system that's recorded in the system. So now we've been able to get all the information in, which is great. We've got a real name, we've got social, we've got birth date. We're really starting to get somewhere with the client. If during this time, if we have any updates to their income, or maybe they didn't have connection with SOAR, now they do, maybe their barriers have changed, anything like that, you can always do a during program enrollment assessment, which is under update annual assessment. This will give you that same information here if you needed to go in, add anything there. And then you would say during program enrollment, and then it'll have today's date, and then it would allow you to capture all this information again for each of the assessment questions. And again, this isn't erasing any of the previous data we've recorded, it is just allowing you to update it. So maybe if the client location is different, you could change that there. You can also use this default last buttons that you see on here to just make this go quickly and fill in the last question you had, and then of course you'd be able to have an opportunity to update that or change that if that's the case. So let's say all of this is the same, but now they have income, so we could use this button here, but then go ahead and say they do have earned income now. And this will give you an opportunity here to record a new contact automatically. So instead of having to go to the quick services afterwards, you can just go ahead and choose that here, and it just kind of saves you a step. So that's how you would record any updated information if you needed to while they already have this enrollment. And now let's say we want to go ahead and say they are enrolled in PATH. So to do that, we would click on the little blue action button. We can click on Edit Enrollment Workflow. And we just want to get to that program enrollment screen here. And let's say on the 20th, we were finally able to determine if they are actually eligible for PATH, and we've got a yes there. If you did have a no, there's a follow-up question there of client was found ineligible or was not enrolled for other reasons. So, but we're going to say yes, this client was enrolled in PATH. And now we'll go ahead and click save on that. We don't need to go through this entire workflow to update any of this, so we can go ahead and cancel out of that workflow. So at this point, we have done the initial intake on the client. We recorded a contact service where when we saw them a week after that. Day after that, we were able to actually engage them, get an assessment, so we added all that information, and then we were even able to go in and determine that they were PATH eligible. And if on that day you determined they were PATH eligible, if that was a contact you had with them where you actually met with them, talked to them, had a conversation, you would also want to record a contact service for that as well through Course Quick Services. So that was the 20th that we said that we found out they were eligible for PATH, and so we'll go ahead and say we did have an interaction with them on that date. So you can see there's quite a bit of work that goes into PATH when it comes to HMIS, just because you have a lot of stuff you're recording, but again, you're really getting some really good data, and you're able to kind of see the progress that you are making with the client on an ongoing basis. And so now at this point, we've done an enrollment, we've went in and add an engage date, we've said that they are eligible for PATH and they're enrolled in PATH now, we've done assessments, we've recorded the individual contacts. Now let's get into services. So once we have determined they're eligible for PATH and put a yes there on that enrollment screen, now we can begin to offer them PATH services. So you would not want to go in and record any services for a client until they are enrolled in PATH, besides that PATH contact service we talked about. Because again, this PATH contact service, that is just saying we had a contact with them. It doesn't really count for a PATH funded service. So to record services, though, we're going to go the same form that we recorded the contacts on, which is that quick services form. And we know that we said it was the 20th that we found out they were eligible for PATH, so we would want to make sure we are only recording path services on the 20th or later. So let's say the 23rd, we worked with the client and we were able to provide for them clinical assessment. So we want to record that service here. Again, this is going to be a required question, just where are they staying currently on this date. And then we would go ahead and click save and close. Now, services are very important in HMIS. They are required. They populate on the path report. So we want to make sure we are recording all the services we are providing for the client. Also, which we'll get into a little bit later, there is a option set up on path projects where it will auto exit a client if they have not received a service or contact or referral in 90 days. It automatically exits them. So we want to make sure we're recording all of those items for our clients so that the system doesn't just automatically exit them. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is that we've said that you always want to record a contact anytime you have contact with the client. Well, something that's going to save you a lot of time here is that every service that we have set up in Client Track, we've also coded that on the back end to count as a contact. So if you are providing any of the path services from that list we saw earlier, it counts as a contact automatically. So on the 23rd, we provided this clinical assessment. That's also going to automatically trigger in the system that that's a contact. So you don't have to worry about going in and also recording a path contact if you have recorded a path service. So that's something that will just save you some time there. Also, there's one kind of unique path service in here I wanted to highlight, and that is the path re-engagement service. So this is used when a client that has been determined they're eligible for path, and they hasn't received a service or contact or referral from you in 15 days or more. So, for instance, for this client, we said they were enrolled in PATH, actually. Remember, not project start date, but they were enrolled in PATH on the 20th. So, if 15 days went by after that and we had no referrals for them, no contacts, no services, so basically we had not seen this client at all, and then 15 days or more, we do come across them, we would want to record a re-engagement service, and that is listed right here. So again, you would never record a re-engagement service if they have not actually been enrolled in PATH. So if they just have a project start date or just have a project start date and an engagement date, they would never get a PATH re-engagement. But that's just after it's been confirmed they're enrolled in PATH, and then they disappear for 15 days or more, you would use this service right here. I'll go ahead and hit cancel there. And we're back to the dashboard screen now. Next thing I want to cover is referrals. So referrals are like services. They would only be recorded after they have actually been enrolled in PATH. So I'm going to click referrals here, click add new, and we'll be taken to the referral screen. So referrals are also very important as well. They are required. They do populate on the PATH report. Every referral should be recorded in the system, even if it's multiple times. So if you refer a client 3 times for the same service, they should have 3 referrals recorded in the system. So here, let's say it's a little bit down the road here. Let's say the 31st. And these are going to be your path referrals right here. So let's say we referred them for job training. So I'll go ahead and select that here. Now for client track here in Georgia, we just have a generic provider set up for all path referrals. And this is mainly just set up for compliance sake. So you're not going to go in and actually pull up and select the actual agency you are referring this client to. You are just going to choose path provider for any of the path referrals in the system. And this will still make all of your referrals populate correctly on your path report. And then this will just have the agency you're logged in as, the user you're logged in, and then the status will automatically set to referral made. We can click next here. You can disregard these options here. These would normally be used to set up an email if it's email authorized to contact the agency you're referring to, which isn't really applicable for the way we've got referrals set up. And then here we have the outcome information on this referral. None of these have asterisks, so you can see none of these are required. What this is getting at though is, this referral is being sent. Do you somehow would you happen to already know the outcome of this? For instance, if this service was provided, then you could put service provided here. You could say, well, they just got information. They actually didn't get a service from this place that you were doing the referral to. Or were they rejected from the agency, or did they not show up? But again, because we are recording this referral right now, we're not going to know what the outcome is. And so for the most part, we would leave this blank. So I'll go ahead and click finish here. Now we can see that we have done a referral with this client for job training on this date. Now, something to know about referrals is that before this client is ever exited from Path, they would need to have the referral status updated if we know they got that referral. And actually, you just want to go ahead and record that in the system as soon as you find that out. So let's go back to the client dashboard and just say down the road a week later we found out they did make it to the place we referred them to for the job training, and so they were able to get that. So what we'd want to do here is just go to our referrals, click the edit referral option here, and then scroll to the bottom, and under result we would want to do service provided. And service provided is the only thing that's going to trigger on your path report that they got the service. If you choose information only, that's still going to trigger the report that they did not get that service from the referral. So again, service provided is what we would want to choose if in fact they got that referral. Now if we never went and updated this, it's also just going to count as that they never got the referral. That's how it will report on your path report. So we'll go back to the dashboard now. So now we've kind of run the full gambit of paths, so to say. We've enrolled them, we've provided services, referrals, contacts, assessments, all that. So let's talk about exits now. Now, I wanted to mention or bring up what are the reasons that a client would be exited from Path. So one of those is that the client has entered another project type. Maybe they have been housed. And so, or maybe they are now being taken care of by the ACT team or the care team. Then we could go ahead and exit the client from Path. Another reason, maybe they've been engaged by another outreach worker or another outreach project. So we're not going to be kind of handling that anymore. That's going to be another project, so we could exit them for that. If the client passed away, we would exit them from the system. There's also client choice. If the client does not want to be enrolled anymore, we could do an exit then. And then finally, if there are no contacts, services, referrals recorded in 90 days, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, then we will have your project set up where it will automatically exit the client from your path project. And the reason that's set up is we know sometimes there are going to be clients that you interact with, you do an enrollment for. Maybe you just have a project start date. Maybe you have an engagement date and a path enroll date. Regardless, you're going to have people that disappear that you never see again. And so the way it's set up in the system is it looks for services, contacts, referrals, and if none of those are recorded within 90 days for this client, then it will go ahead and auto exit them from this project. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen a lot because, hopefully you guys are able to be out there and you're finding these clients and engaging them, recording these services, referrals, contacts, so they're able to stay active until you are able to actually go in and exit them manually and find out information from them as you're exiting them. But if not, the system will go ahead and kind of take care of that and auto exit them. But let's say we are going to go manually exit this client. So we know there's a reason why we are going to go in and exit this client. It's not just because they've disappeared or anything like that. So we're going to click the button beside the enrollment and we're going to say exit the enrollment. So we're going to have the exit date. So let's put this in August. We'll say August 2nd. We are exiting them. And let's say they went to rental housing. So we'll choose that here. We're going to say they completed the programs, the exit reason. And anytime you're exiting a client, it is going to bring up their path enrollment information here. Normally you would not want to update this unless for some reason this was keyed in incorrectly. Or maybe these are blank here. And the reason this comes up is anytime a client is being exited, it is required that they have this date of status determination and also the yes or no question if they became enrolled in path or not. And so that's the reason that this comes up. This is basically a shortcut to that program enrollment form as far as these two options go, and it just gives you an opportunity to review that here and make sure that information is there. And so we'll go ahead now and just do save, and then this will walk us through our standard exit procedure, which of course using again that default last assessment can save you time, but then still give you an opportunity to update any of this information if it has changed. In the meantime, let's say for instance they actually got a raise. We'll go ahead and update that there. And then this will be recorded as a contact, kind of maybe our final contact here. So we'll go ahead and choose path contact. And they are not staying on the Streets Emergency Shelter or Safe Haven now because we have just exited them to housing. So now we'll go ahead and click save and are finished. So now we can see that they do have an exit date here. Housing move-in date is not recorded as far as this field goes for path project, so that's normal that will stay empty there, but we can see the exit destination listed there. We can see our final contact we've got right here. And so even though I've just talked about exiting someone because they obtained permanent housing, one thing I would add here is that you are allowed to provide services and care for people up to 90 days after they're placed into permanent housing, or if they're referred to intensive community mental health services. And so if, for instance, on this date right here, this client went into their own rental housing, I don't have to immediately exit them from PATH. I could keep them in the project for 90 days after that, and that way I could still kind of work with the client, do case management, make sure they're stable and okay. But then after that 90 days, I would go in and exit them. So this concludes our PATH training. Hopefully it's been insightful and is a good reference tool. Again, always refer to the PATH HUD manual if you need any follow-up to any of these. It really gets into a lot of details I couldn't really in this video. And as always, you can submit issue tickets if you have any other questions. Thank you.